Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Conversation With. My name is Terrence Fox, Head of Innovation with iAdvise, and it's my pleasure, as always, to speak with you on why building CX trust breeds organic success. We have a great quick show for you today, and before we actually dive in, I challenge each of you to think of the role trust plays in your own buying journey. What is it that you're trusting? Why are you a loyal, maybe local too, loyal customer to particular brands? Now more than ever, especially, trust is key. And when I looked at one specific example of trust in the buyer's experience and buyer's journey, Forrester did a recent look at in-person visits. And when Forrester actually surveyed consumers about their attitudes towards companies and their ability to provide effective guidance through the pandemic, we found that the trust was only about 13%. Only 13% said they actually trusted retailers to have their best interests and safety in mind. So while that's actually looking at an in-person example, this topic of trust is extremely important in today's buyer journey, and obviously more so than ever before. So to tackle the topic of social trust, we're lucky to be joined by Lynn Hunsaker, and she's the co-founder and chief customer officer of ClearAction Continuum, a consulting group that is known as the customer value growth experts. And Lynn is, besides being a pleasure to speak to in general, she's an expert through her 30 years of driving customer experience and major marketing change for brands like Sunoco, Applied Materials, and others. And her years teaching on this sort of topic. She actually teaches at UC Berkeley and does Santa Cruz as well. She's written 4 ebooks and numerous articles on the marketing operations industry and guided dozens of companies and was actually inducted into the Customer Think Hall of Fame. So it's my absolute pleasure to be joined by Lynn Hunsaker on why building CX trust breeds organic success. Lynn, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello, Terrence. How are you today?
Good. I'm feeling a little jazzed up. I feel like I'm talking too fast. So yell at me to slow down if you need, Lynn.
I really love that countdown music, and I think it would be a good thing for us all to adopt at the beginning of every meeting. It gives everybody a chance to, reset, re-energize, and also kind of get their act together, as we all find in this pandemic time of all online meetings.
Right. Yeah, it gets the blood moving, which is important, right? I think everyone's getting used to an unfortunately sedentary lifestyle. So any upbeat jazz and saxophone will do the trick, right? Lynn, talk to me. How have you been, I'll say, simply entertaining yourself the last 12 months while we've been isolated?
Well, I'm a big fan of the Today Show. I watch that and get a lot of ideas about what's going on and how people are thinking. I like to follow LinkedIn. I spend quite a lot of time on LinkedIn. I'm in there multiple times a day and love to see what people are posting there. I'm also a big fan of customerthink.com. I'm a big contributor there, but I also find a lot of inspiration in terms of where are people's heads at? What are they advocating as issues, trends, solutions? And usually that inspires me to kind of get on my soapbox and add to that conversation. Also the CXPA, cxpa.org. They've got a wonderful blog, really tremendous inputs there. And their discussion forum is a tremendous source of inspiration and keeping a pulse on where people are at in their thinking. I would say that I actually spend maybe more time reading and being exposed to things that aren't in customer service and customer experience. I try to go for things that are about personalities and how we can be more harmonious with different viewpoints, which I think dovetails so well with 2020.
Right.
And especially thinking about how general managers and CEOs look at business. And so just talking to other people, say in my walking group or whatever, I find that they often have really pithy and insightful ideas about customer experience that somehow get a little bit watered down, or I don't know, it's kind of the trees in the forest conundrum, right? My fellow CXers.
Well, that's great. And with the Customer Think Hall of Fame, Lynn, did they actually take a bronze cast of your face and put it on a plaque somewhere as well? I'm thinking
Well,
baseball Hall of Fame, of course.
we haven't gotten that far, but I did get a little trophy memento, and it was only 5 of us so far who have been entered into that Hall of Fame. So it's quite a privilege.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I was happy to see that. Now, Lynn, put yourself in the shoes of a consumer for a second. Tell us about a memorable digital experience you've had recently.
Well, I've had a lot of digital experiences, and I guess the ones that were most pleasing were where I was curious about changing some information in my profile, or changing my payment time or my payment amount, or pausing payment or anything like that. And I found that a few websites allowed me to do all that myself, and it was pretty straightforward. Occasionally I needed to ask the chatbot for help, and when that was also very, very short, or it immediately got me a person, that was an ideal experience. I can also think of a lot of times, and especially at the beginning of the pandemic, where it was quite frustrating, especially since it was circular. And so, you would try to do something online and come to a roadblock, and then you would call in, and then it would be call this other number, and then, go to the physical place. No, we can't do that. Go back online, call this. And so what that pointed to me was that it's not so much the friendliness and the knowledgeability of the people that you're interacting with. I think they really try. I think we've done a lot of great work with customer touch points in terms of people's attitudes and their willingness. But where it gets tripped up is if they're speaking from a script, or it's or where things are just not out behind the scenes. I think that's the common thread. The behind the scenes in terms of legal, or the CFO or the CMO's viewpoint is just off, right? And so that's where you get into all these little tangles.
Yeah, it's you said a few things that I thought were pretty interesting. One, the human escalation we saw is incredibly important, right? If you have AI on your site, I've told this numerous times on the show that I'm the type of guy who hits 0 100 times to get past the bot to get right to a human. So that human escalation is extremely important, especially the past 12 months. And then the other piece is that, when we saw that the digital experience was down, they were transferring contact center reps or in-house reps to their home office. Supply chain was down. It was a real test to the entire end-to-end customer experience,
That's right. You got a pretty good sense of the warts that are behind the scenes there.
Yeah, right. Because everyone was kind of exposed, right?
Yeah.
Now, Lynn, have you learned anything interesting about yourself as a consumer in the past 12 months?
Well, I guess, I think that being prepared as a consumer, in terms of, I've always been very active with my city in California for earthquake preparedness, and actually, joining the neighborhood group leadership, and even teaching classes to fellow neighborhood leaders. So that got me in the mindset of having toilet paper and water and the basics on hand. Right. So when this whole thing started, I felt like I was calmer, and I didn't have that kind of panic type of situation with regard to physical well-being.
Right.
So I think that I've appreciated certain mindsets that I've built up beforehand in having that kind of calm.
Right. So Lynn is a prepared consumer. So
Pretty much.
Next disaster, go to Lynn's Basement.
Yeah, I had quite a number of toilet paper rolls up in the rafters of my garage, so no, I never had to go stand in line for that.
Yeah, which isn't scary until it's a problem, right?
Exactly.
Well, wonderful. And Lynn, thank you so much again for being here. The topic today is, of course, why building CX trust breeds organic success. And while a portion of this might seem obvious, of course, It's an exciting topic nonetheless, especially today. Before we dive in, I know I tried to do my best, Lynn, to give an overview of your history and why, of course, you are an expert. But tell us a bit about yourself and your expertise, especially as it pertains to this topic.
Sure. So I was a voice of the customer manager about 30 years ago at the beginning of my career, and I was in the strategic planning department. So that's where I reported into. And that was a really wonderful place to be because it gave me a purview of the entire company and also tentacles into the entire company. My next role was also voice of customer manager in a semiconductor company in California. Right. And that was also company-wide reporting into quality. And I became head of corporate quality for a few years. And well, in that type of a role, I was responsible for thwarting a potential crisis where our largest customer was about to leave us. The CEO stood up and said we were really hard to work with and arrogant. And so that was the mandate to not only collect voice of the customer, but make sure that we were doing things with it to engender trust and to turn that relationship around. And sure enough, we did. So I learned a lot from that. And that's what I'm all about now, is helping people figure out how to really use customer insights throughout the company so that you have these behind the scenes smoothness.
So Lynn, let's get to the meat of the discussion too. Now, what is social trust?
Well, social trust is like any other trust. It's really about having a sense of confidence in who you're dealing with, and feeling that they're being transparent with you, so that you're not worried about playing games or anything else. You can just focus on the relationship. And I think that's where we come to organic growth, right? Organic growth, I want to just spend a moment about. It's where you are seeing that people want to buy more. They want to tell people more about your brand. Well, you don't have to put fertilizer on it, right? It's organic. Yeah. You're not having to entice it through advertisement or various engagement things. Customers just feel like you get them. They feel like it's a hand in glove experience for them, that you're their go-to naturally, right? So that's what we mean by organic growth, that you don't have to be putting so much effort on it, such as, the akin to fertilizer, or growing by mergers and acquisitions and new product launches and things like that, which are always going to be part of business, but you definitely want to see less churn organically.
Right. And this concept of social trust, Lynn, I don't mean to pick on them, but they're the easiest target for me, at least. But when I think of social trust, I think of naturally a car salesman, right? And the reason why, maybe when you're working with a car salesman, maybe you're not entirely comfortable with them. Maybe you don't believe they have your best interests in mind. And I think it's something that everyone has gone through, right? Buying a car can be intimidating. You have to put a lot of trust in the person that you're working with, that they've got your best intentions in mind. But then on the other side, you have a wonderful experience, maybe car shopping. You can see the impact that trust has throughout that journey and the importance of it. But like you said, that of course is directly tied to that organic growth, right? If I had a great, I'm one of 5 brothers. There's Fox brothers all throughout New England. And if I had a good experience at X car salesman and felt that trust, that sort of connection and growth, I can, of course, it'll build off of and expand through my network, for example. So it's a super neat topic that I think is very easy to kind of analyze your own experiences for.
That's right. And I really learn about trust through Edelman. It's Edelman. And if you go to that website, you'll find that they do a trust study every year. They publish it in January. So the 2021 is, a real call to action, a real eye opener for leaders across the world. And I just want to help everyone understand the way that they've talked about trust as the old framework or the new framework. So what you're talking about with that kind of used car salesman cliche is that there's a focus solely on profit. Right? You know that they're just out for your money. And so they're all about protecting their brand, controlling information, and standing alone, being independent. Whereas the new trust architecture is about profit with purpose. You know why you are in existence,
right.
because you know that your customers are actually the source of your profit, and it's not that your investors are really the source of your existence. The investors depend on your customers as you do for dividends, budgets, and salaries, and therefore there's a true appreciation for customers through and through. And how we demonstrate that profit with a purpose is through transparency, admitting mistakes, showing what we're working on, showing our progress, being humble about awards and such, and helping people see that we're multidimensional. We're human. A business is not just a building or something like this. We're human, and therefore engaging with all of the stakeholders. And so the more modern approach to running your business is on this new trust architecture of profit with purpose, transparency, and engagement with 5 key stakeholder groups. And that is, first and foremost, customers, and then employees, and then your suppliers, the investors, and community. So this is something that CEOs have bought into over the past couple of years in a very explicit way by signing what the Business Roundtable calls the purpose of business, that to serve all these 5 stakeholder groups equally, rather than having an overemphasis on investors.
That's great, and thank you, Fritz, for putting that up. The link to Edelman, I'm sure he'll put in the comments as well. But thank you, Lynn, for sharing that. Have you seen any recent shifts in social trust? I mean, obviously, this profit with purpose is key.
So interesting. The 2021 report shows that trust has taken a nosedive. Social media used to be a source, but now it's the least trusted source behind government, behind the media itself, mainstream media. Actually, business is seen right now to be the most trustworthy spokesperson, and within business, the CEO has a real opportunity at this moment to step up and advocate the top 5 things that people care about with business, and that's showing that you are in existence not just for profit, but for a broader purpose, right? Being transparent, having a good respect for your employees' and customers' safety and well-being, and showing that publicly. So it's things along those lines that really help people to feel that companies are the ones that, which companies they want to deal with, which companies they want to build strong bonds with.
Have you seen anyone that's made you, that's impressed you?
Well, I have to say that anyone who's impressed me has also had another side to the coin. But, well, I really was impressed with Service Champions. They're a local or a service organization for, say, your HVAC system and things like that, and hot water heater. Had all of those things conk out on me at the beginning of the pandemic. And so it was especially nerve-wracking that, we had to wear masks, and I was afraid that, they were coming in my house and all this. They handled it really wonderfully, better than I've ever experienced any, home provider of any sort in the past. I really like that. The CXPA has always been very amazing to me in how they handle questions or complaints or anything like that. I feel like they're very straightforward. And American Express has been one that I've appreciated on the business side. They tend to be pretty proactive in communicating things. But as I said, there's two sides to every coin for everybody. Well, we all have some room for improvement.
Yeah, and that concept of communication comes up again. It does in almost every one of these sessions that we have, right? If the consumer is left to guess or is unaware, and if you're not over communicating, you're creating gaps in the experience where the consumer can get frustrated or feel alone, right? So let's talk about B2B versus B2C. Is B2B actually behind B2C when it comes to customer experience, in your opinion, Lynn?
Well, I actually did a 5-year study of B2B customer experience practices. And at that time, this is 2010 to 2015, there was one year gap. But I was finding some very interesting things there. One, that what people were doing most commonly was not necessarily a best practice when you did the correlation to what people were seeing as, strong business results coming out of their customer experience, or having a more holistic and mature customer experience management system in place. The things that those guys were doing were in the minority. Okay, so I identified 6 key success factors there. But then when I compared what I was finding in my study to what, say, Forrester was showing in their studies at that time, the majority of the Forrester participants were not B2B, they were consumer. And that's been historically their strength. I found that there was very little gap in the way that we are doing customer experience practices. So I've always been surprised when I'm seeing these articles and claims everywhere I look that B2B is really far behind, and B2B is kind of, in the Stone Ages, or maybe babyish for using personas, or using Net Promoter Score, or using whatever journey maps. I find that people are, first of all, lumping all B2B companies in one, or they might be looking at a certain type of B2B company. For example, early growth SaaS companies, software as a service.
Yeah.
So you need to be specific about what type of B2B company you're referring to, because there's tons and tons of small and medium-sized B2B companies. There's also large B2B companies that give supply things like paper clips or paper. There's other ones that do close to rocket science type of stuff. Tremendous precision required, say, for example, putting a freeway overpass together. If something's off by an inch, that's a major screw up. In the semiconductor industry, where you've got, chips smaller than the fingernail, and materials being layered on there, hundreds of layers, at the very, very tiny micro level. It's just amazing what B2B is pulling off. So I think that B2B tends to get short shrift, and I've just written an article about that on customerthink.com. It's called 10 B2B Customer Experience Myths and How to Improve Your Customer Experience Maturity.
So on that topic, and I'm sure Fritz is working on it, the link side as well, what do you feel are the quick things B2C can learn from B2B?
Well, first of all, that B2B tends to have some things that are already built in for customer experience excellence. And that is the fact that they tend to have dedicated account teams, because they're dealing with very large scale purchases. Sometimes these purchase cycles are lengthy. And with these account teams, there tends to be a lot of built-in customer service and customer success as just part and parcel of what they do. So we need to give credit where credit's due in terms of the types of things that B2B has built in. And not worry too much about whether B2B is using specific CX tools. It really doesn't matter what tools you're using. For example, when I go to a conference, I don't really hear that much about what Disney is doing, what Nordstrom is doing, and what I sometimes hear about USAA. But the brands that you feel like they just get it.
Right.
They're just freaking getting it. They don't necessarily have to use, these specific tools.
Right.
Actually, they're putting more emphasis when you look at the common threads. And one of my friends, James Dodson, has done a fairly good analysis of looking at what drives Virgin and Disney and such. The common thing is that their CEO, their C team, has adopted a North Star that's based on how they want customers to feel.
Right.
And this North Star is sacred. I mean, it's so strong for them that it's a basis for how they analyze the business, how they review performance of individuals and groups, how they make their decisions, CapEx, OpEx. It might be even the basis for, you know what, you're out of here. You've crossed that line.
Right.
And it really shapes what the legal team decides on, what the CFO decides on, how they do their billing, everything that they do behind the scenes that actually is the source of most of the problems that we have as customers, where there's just a misalignment, right? And so I think that that's what B2B and B2C need to do better on. But that is really the ultimate thing that we should be benchmarking, not benchmarking techniques.
Got it. Lynn, I've already kept you for 27 minutes.
Oh, well, time flies.
One last question I have for you, as it pertains to trust and the role you see trust playing in the customer experience. Lynn, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball and make a prediction for 2021, and take this however you want. But looking down the road, what do you feel is going to be integral in 2021, or what would you recommend to major brands and retailers looking ahead?
Well, the companies who can embrace these hallmarks of trust, which are profit with a purpose, transparency, and engaging at the customer, employee, supplier, community, and investors more equally. Those are going to be the ones who will win in the long run here, even maybe in the short run, because people are plain frustrated with fake news, with selfishness,
right,
with jumping over hoops. We've got plenty of time now that we're not commuting to, complain about it to one another and to try to find a better way. I've been really surprised by the housing market, for example, that people are just buying up houses because, we're fed up with with the situation we were in up until now, and we're making changes. I think that this is something we can see with buying patterns as well. People are getting more fed up, but they're going to be migrating. So this is the time now to really embrace transparency and engender trust through and through, not just with customer touch points, but in all the nooks and crannies of our business.
Well, Lynn, thank you so much for your time. Lynn has made her bet for 2021. It was a pleasure, Lynn. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us.
I loved it, Terrence. Thanks so much. Take care.
Absolutely. So in closing, have you ever wanted a glass of wine, but not the whole bottle? Me too. So join us next week to talk with us and Coravin out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, to discuss improving efficiencies with your own CX. Man, I'm really stumbling through this. It sounds like I had a glass of wine. But join us next week at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thank you all for talking with us today.